I never thought anything strange would happen while driving for a rideshare service. People have always talked about weird passengers or creepy situations, but I've never experienced anything out of the ordinary. That is until I started taking the night shifts. It was a Friday night, just past midnight, and the streets were quiet, too quiet. I always preferred the late night shifts, fewer riders, and less traffic. Plus, the night rates were higher, and that made all the difference when you're trying to make ends meet. My car hummed along as I rolled through empty streets, the occasional flickering streetlight casting long, eerie shadows on the road. I was about to call it a night when a new ride request pinged on my phone. Jessica, 5 stars, 2 miles away. Great, I thought, one last ride and I'd be done. I accepted the request and followed the GPS. As I neared the pickup point, my phone pinged again. It was odd. There was no visible building or house in sight, just an empty lot with overgrown weeds and an abandoned gas station on the corner. A cold chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off. Maybe the rider was a block away or I missed something. I parked and waited. No one. I checked the app again. Jessica was supposed to be here. My eyes scanned the lot, but there was no sign of movement. After a minute or two, I was ready to cancel the ride, but then I saw her. She came out from behind the gas station, walking slowly, her form barely visible in the dim light. She didn't look up at me, just opened the back door and slid into the seat behind me, her face hidden by a hood. "Jessica?" I asked, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. She didn't respond, just nodded slightly. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. There was something off, but I didn't know what. I decided not to press her. It was late, and maybe she didn't want to talk. I put the car in gear and started driving. As we drove, the silence became more unbearable. Normally, I'd make small talk, ask about their night, maybe discuss the weather, anything to fill the quiet, but something about her kept me from speaking. Instead, I focused on the road. The GPS said the drop-off location was only 15 minutes away. I could do 15 minutes of awkward silence. But as we approached a dark, narrow road, the GPS recalculated, instructing me to turn down a side street. It looked like it led into the woods. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the screen. Something wasn't right. "Is this the right way?" I asked, half turning my head toward the back seat. Jessica didn't reply, but I heard a soft shuffling sound as if she was shifting in her seat. I turned back to the road, my fingers gripping the wheel tighter. As we entered the wooded road, the streetlights disappeared, and the only light came from my headlights, casting eerie shadows on the trees as they twisted in the wind. Then, without warning, the car temperature dropped. I could see my breath in front of me. My hands trembled as I cranked up the heat, but it didn't help. I glanced in the rearview mirror again, expecting to see Jessica bundled up against the cold, but she was staring straight ahead, her face partially visible now in the dim light. Pale, too pale, with eyes that seemed sunken. She didn't seem to notice the cold, or me for that matter. My heart pounded in my chest. I needed to get out of this place. I picked up speed, hoping to reach the drop-off point sooner, but every mile felt like an eternity. Finally, the GPS announced that I had reached the destination. I pulled over to the side of the road, expecting her to get out. The problem was, there was no house, no building, nothing but trees and a long stretch of empty road. I turned to face her. "This is where you wanted to be dropped off." But she wasn't there. The back seat was empty. My heart stopped. I whipped around fully, staring at the seat. She was gone, completely gone. My mind raced. Had she jumped out when I wasn't looking? That was impossible. The doors never opened. I checked the app to see if the ride had ended, but Jessica's profile was gone. It was as if the ride never existed. I felt a rising panic in my chest. My head pounded. I needed to get out of there. I floored the gas and sped away, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away from that place. I tried to rationalize it on the way home. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe Jessica had gotten out without me noticing. It wasn't uncommon for people to bail early on rides. I convinced myself that's what happened. But then it started happening again. A week later, I got another ride request around the same time, late night, isolated location. The name on the profile was Mark, another 5-star rider. This time, I was already on edge. I almost didn't accept the request, but I needed the money. When I arrived, there was no sign of anyone. But before I could cancel, Mark appeared out of nowhere, just like Jessica. He got in, silent, and didn't speak a word. The drop-off location was a few miles away, but when we reached it, he too disappeared, vanished, like he'd never been there. And just like before, his profile disappeared from the app, and there was no record of the ride. It kept happening. Every few nights, I'd get a request from a new rider. John, Emily, Claire, they'd all vanish before the ride was over. No explanation, no trace, just gone. I was losing sleep over it. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see their faces, pale and distant, staring blankly into the night. I needed to know what was happening, so I started researching. I went through old news articles, online forums, and anything I could find. That's when I discovered the accidents. Each of the names matched people who had died in car crashes on the same routes I was driving. Jessica had died 3 years ago. Her car was found abandoned in the same area I had picked her up. Mark had been hit by a truck 2 years ago. Claire? She drowned when her car skidded off a bridge just months before. They were all dead. Every one of them. I started to feel like I was being haunted, like they were using the app to reach out to me, to relive their last moments, or worse, to pull me into their world. But the worst part was that I had no idea what they wanted. I decided I needed to stop driving, but one night, after a few days of avoiding the app, I received another ride request. I stared at the screen in disbelief. This time, the name on the request was my own. Jake. Same profile picture, same details. My blood ran cold. I threw my phone onto the passenger seat, my heart racing. But the pinging wouldn't stop. Over and over, the ride request kept coming through. I gave in. I picked up my phone and accepted the ride. If this was some kind of cosmic joke, I needed to face it. I followed the GPS to the pickup point, but this time it led me back to my apartment. I parked in front and waited, staring at the front door. Nothing happened for a few minutes, and I almost believed it was over, that it was all in my head. But then, the passenger door creaked open. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My eyes stayed glued to the rearview mirror, but no one was there. Just the door, slowly closing on its own. The car felt colder than ever, and my breath was visible in the air. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. I could feel a presence behind me, something watching, waiting. Suddenly, the seatbelt in the back seat clicked. It was like someone had buckled themselves in. My hands shook, and I dared to look up at the rearview mirror one last time. This time, I saw him. A shadowy figure, face obscured, sitting directly behind me. My reflection stared back at me in the mirror, wide-eyed, frozen in terror. I slammed on the gas and sped down the road, not caring where I was going. The figure didn't move, didn't react, just sat there, calm and still. I drove for what felt like hours until the figure finally spoke, in a voice that was barely a whisper but echoed through my entire body. "This is your stop." The car screeched to a halt. I turned around, but the back seat was empty again. My heart pounded, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I never drove for that app again. And now, every time I see a car on the road at night, I wonder who, or what, might be in the back seat.